I'm over here at my wonderful, wonderful collection of mystery stuff that nobody gets to see, but now you're going to get to see. And it's actually triggers of a story, and I guess that's kind of the reason you collect things, because it has the story and the connection thereof. So this particular episode is basically talking about a very, very important part of my life that has to do with the Fascination game. Now, people say, oh, what is a Fascination game? Well, games are fascinating. Fascination is a very, very specific game. It's a form of electronic bingo in lights. And the game has a very, very long history and heritage. It goes way back to the early 1920s, where it was first being originated, and it made its big world's debut at the 1933 World's Fair in Chicago. This is way before my time. We're talking almost 100 years ago. Nobody around watching these videos actually remembers this, but it's important to understand the magnitude of this game. This is really, really special, special game. And it started in an amusement park, and there's been some old timers who speculated on which park it was because they weren't around and they don't remember. But as the story goes, there was a man in an amusement park who was running a pig race. And we're going back to the 20s, so it might have actually been real pigs. They actually did that rather than animated pigs. But he was running a pig race on a boardwalk. And directly across the midway from him was a bingo. And every night when the crowd would start to come for bingo, the place would be jam-packed with all the people. They're going to sit there all night playing bingo. And this guy's standing there with this pig race, and he's doing no business. So he's watching all the people who were going to the bingo. And he's saying to himself, what can I come up with that could attract this clientele that loves bingo? That's where Fascination was born. He was intelligent enough that he was able to design an amusement machine that was based on bingo. So I never got to see the original when it was made. I'm sure it was pretty crude, but he made the first game that eventually became Fascination. And what it was a form of bingo done electronically. So he made a board that had 25 holes like a bingo card, and people would roll balls and they would land through the hole and light the light of a bingo card on the head of the machine, on the back screen. And the balls recycled, and you kept rolling the balls, lighting up more lights, marking your card, trying to make 5 lights in a row, just like in bingo, 5 in a row across, up and down, diagonal. The first one who got it, just like in bingo, won the race. But because it was an amusement game with a race, there was a bell that rang, and the announcer would say, "We got a winner." And here is a winner again across the board. Back then, early race games, we know the ones where the item runs up on a motor and it hits the top and the bell rings. There was none of that back then. As a matter of fact, they used to do a lot of things with water and ping pong balls. There was one that was very prevalent on the boardwalk, and it was like a fish game, fish bowl. And some of them were just a tube that went across and up. Others were a little more fancy that had a molded plastic fish around the tube, so you were like they're shooting the water into the fish's mouth, and the water would accumulate in the tube, and a ping pong ball would float up the tube, and the only way you knew who won was the first ping pong ball that fell out of the tube on the floor. They won the game. So very primitive. You're talking back in the 20s, in the 1920s, not 2020. Back then, people were turning cranks on penny arcade machines to look in the viewer to watch the flipping cards making a motion picture. That was amusement arcades. The penny arcade, the hand squeezer, the ball would go up. Mechanical games. So here was a new invention, an interlinked electronic system that was electronic bingo. Really very, very revolutionary for its day. So although it's made its first debut at some small amusement park in Opsquash, we don't know where, the game got a patent, And when they started manufacturing the game, it made a big world's debut at the 1933 World's Fair in Chicago. Big hit. Everybody was there to play this new game. And I don't even think it was called Fascination back then. The name Fascination came about a little bit later on because of the success of this game, that people would play it for hours and they were fascinated playing it, and others would watch them and they were fascinated watching it. So the name became Fascination, the game of electronic bingo and lights. So I was completely unaware of Fascination when I was a little Randy. I was born in 1960. Sure, there were Fascinations around, but it wasn't a game I played. I didn't know about it. My parents didn't even know about it, and they played games on the boardwalk. We played arcades. We played skee-ball as a little kid. You could do that type of thing. We played Pokerino, where you roll the ball down, it lands in the hole, lights up the card, like a poker card, and you try to make your hands. You get 6 balls. The balls just sit in the holes, and you do the best you can with 6 balls. There was 21, similar type of thing. Another game was called Bingarino, where similar idea, where the ball would land in a hole with numbers, and it would light the numbers up on a bingo card. You tried to make, but all these games were single units that you were playing only against the machine with a specified amount of shots. 5 shots, 6 shots, whatever the machine was set up to do, that's how many balls you got. That's they landed in the holes, game was over. It was you against the machine, against the odds. But Fascination was different. You weren't playing against the machine. The machine was a tool with you. You were playing with the machine to beat everybody else because all the machines were interlinked. So you became as one with the machine. That's the biggest part, I think, that gravitated me towards Fascination when I found the game. It wasn't until 1974 when I first found Fascination, and it was in Seaside Heights, where, again, we grew up in that area, and I was on that boardwalk all the time. And at that time, my sister was playing Skillo. Now, what is Skillo? Well, again, for those who don't understand all these terminologies, you have to understand it. Skillo was the boardwalk version of bingo. They gave you cards, they called numbers, you marked the cards with chips. Instead of the card reading B-I-N-G-O, it was S-K-I-L-O. And they would call S15 instead of big B15. And the numbers would be the same, 1 through 75, just like bingo, but it was Skillo. Well, why would they call it Skillo and not bingo? It was to differentiate the difference. Particularly in New Jersey, Skillo was the legal version of bingo on the boardwalk. Bingo was for cash, for charities, things of this nature, but Skillo, which was basically the same game, you couldn't win cash. It was for prizes, so it was supposed to be amusements for fun, and the way the statutes were written, nothing could be run as bingo. So they couldn't call it bingo, so they called it Skillo. And they added a couple extra ways that you could win, like the small diamond, the large diamond. These are not necessarily in bingo, certainly weren't at that time. They became a little bit more prevalent later on when they tried to look for things, but Skillo had those extra ways, and it was a big game on the boardwalk. Well, my sister was, and still is, will always be, 2.5 years older than I, and at the time I was 13, she was 16, and she was playing some games that I didn't play. Now, my sister had developed mononucleosis one summer because she started kissing boys at the age of 16. And one of the things she was told by the doctor when she had mono was she can't go swimming. She wasn't supposed to be in the sunlight. So when my mom and my dad and I would go to the pool, what is my sister going to do? So my parents would give her money to go play the games on the boardwalk, and she started playing Skillo at a young age. Usually you're not playing Skillo at 16, but she found it, and she found that it was interesting to play, and it took time. So now we all start playing Skillo as a family because my sister got into it, so now we're all playing it at night. And Skillo is not a game you can win very often because you're playing against a big house, a bunch of people, and you know, you could go there, you could play all night long and maybe never win a game. It's very discouraging. Well, I'm sitting there playing one day, all day long, another day that I didn't win anything, and I'm sitting next to a hot drink vending machine. And on the side of the machine, there was a sign that said, Sonny and Ricky's Skillo coupons were also redeemable at Lucky's Fascination, 1 block south. Well, obviously, it was Sonny and Ricky's Skillo that I was playing at, which is just the particular designation of that particular store, because there were Fred Skillo, Surf Skillo, Strand Skillo, Henry Skillo. This was Sonny's and Ricky's Skillo, which was a big name in Seaside at that time. And I was intrigued, and I says to the girls who were working there, I says, what does that mean? And she says, oh, well, you can use the coupons you win from Skillo at the Fascination. And I'm like, what is Fascination? So she's trying to explain it to me. It's like bingo, this and the other. And I just didn't get the explanation she gave to me. It was probably a very poor explanation she gave to me, figuring I'm a kid. She's not going to go through a lot of explanation. So she says, well, it's only a block down. Why don't you go take a look? So I did. So I got up and I went down and I checked it out. It was the first time I walked into a Fascination anywhere. And it was very different from anything that I had ever seen. I'm used to going into arcades where there's all kinds of varied machines. They're all lined up with all kinds of shapes and sizes. Fascination was very rigid and very uniform. All the machines look exactly the same, and they're lined up in this particular configuration, which was the standard, in 2 rows on either side of the wall with a walkway in the middle. And all the machines are identical. And they look like soldiers all lined up there. The place was very nice with carpeting, had air conditioning, which wasn't common back in 1974 on the boardwalk. Most arcades were old and had wooden floors and no air conditioning. This was a beautiful store. Glass showcases along the walls, displaying prizes, back wall. There was a guy running the game, sitting at a control booth at the end of the store, and he spoke on an announcement speaker as people were playing and telling them what's going on and the next game was coming up. So I was greeted by a hostess who was working there, and she invited me to try it and play. That's what I was there for, so I sat down and I tried it. And I rolled the balls, and the bell would ring, you roll the ball, it goes in the hole, it lights the light, comes back, you keep going over. And of course, I lost and played again. I played several games. I played, I think, at that time, $5. It was 20 cents a game. And that's not one game, $5. You're playing 25 games. So the game lasted for a minute and a half. So I was there over half an hour. And during that time, I won 2 games. That's all I won. And I received 3 coupons each game. So I had a total of 6 coupons. Well, that's not a lot of coupons, but in the realm of things, I would go sit at Skillo all day long and win nothing. So 6 coupons is better than nothing. Well, what is the value of 6 coupons? Okay, here was the breakdown in this establishment, as was common with Skillo. Skillo, each coupon had a value of $0.10. And they had their tickets printed in 10s, and they had some 5s. So if a Skillo winner could get 40 coupons, he was winning $4. That was a typical payout for a standard game. They had bonus wins. If they had multiple winners, they would divide the 40 coupons. That's why they had 5s. So if they had 3 winners, you can't divide 40 easily by 3, so they would give each winner 15, 10 and a 5. That was $1.50. Well, interestingly enough, Skillo used to cash those coupons for money. Totally illegal. That's the reason they're called Skillo. They're not supposed to pay cash that bingo was. The games on the boardwalk are not cash payouts. But for Skillo to compete with bingo at church or a firehouse, whatever you do, that we're all paying cash, the same people who would play Skillo all the time were the ones who played bingo. They weren't playing for toasters, so they would give these people cash for the coupons. And they had to do it very underhandedly. In Sonny Ricky's, they had a side door, like a closet at the end with a 2-way mirror, and they would take the people into the room, buy your tickets, give you the cash, and you'd come out so nobody saw what you were doing. Other Skillos were a little more daring, and they would just take the tickets and make change right on the counter, assuming nobody's watching. But everybody knew what was going on. Skillo coupons were redeemable for cash. Well, Fascination tickets were worth twice of what Skillo tickets were. The translation was one Fascination ticket was 2 coupons at Skillo. So that made a ticket 20 cents. So I won 6 tickets. I won $1.20. They wouldn't cash it in for $1.20 because they only dealt with dollars, so I could have cashed in 5 tickets for $1. But what am I going to get with $1? So I was looking like, what can I get? I figured I'm not going back. So I got a little cardboard sign with a cheap wooden frame, and it said like shave and a haircut 5 cents. That would hang on my wall, and I enjoyed it. I was a kid. It was 6 tickets. Fine. I spent $5. I had fun playing. I got a sign. Everything's fine. I left Fascination, went back to Skillo, figured I'll never go back again. It was nice, but wasn't a big deal. Okay. As the story goes, my mother comes over later to see me and my sister playing Skillo. And I told my mom where I won my, shave and a haircut sign at Fascination. What's Fascination? So I explained it to her. Now she wanted to see it too. Okay, so we all went over to try Fascination again so I can show it to her. Now I knew a little bit about it, so I'm explaining it to my mom. We all played. And my mom won a couple games. She liked it. She thought this was a fun game. My dad liked it. I liked it. I wasn't crazy about it. I liked it. So every day we went to the boardwalk, we'd stop into Fascination, we'd play some games of Fascination, and then we'd end up over at Skillo the rest of the night playing Skillo. Okay, well, Fascination had just opened. It was 1974, was their first year that they opened in Seaside Heights at Lucky's Fascination. My sister now ended up getting a job on the boardwalk, her first job, first summer job. And she worked for the Greyhound race game and the nickel pitch that was down in Funtown Pier, which was Seaside Park, about 6 blocks down further than the Fascination. Turns out the people who owned the nickel pitch and the Greyhound race game were the same people who owned Lucky's Fascination. And they had a store policy that if you worked for them, you couldn't play at their games. Their reasoning was that they didn't want anybody to think you had an unfair advantage because you worked for them, even though you didn't work at that store. But more so, they were concerned because if you work for a group of great game operators, you get to know who else works there. Next thing you know, you pat my back, I'll pat your back. You come in there, the guy who's working at the nickel pitch is going to say you won and give you a big prize even if you didn't win. And then you'll go over to the game where he works and he'll give you that prize, tit for tat. And who's getting robbed but the owner? So they made it so if you worked for any of their games, you couldn't play at any of their games. So my sister, now, because she got the job at the nickel pitch, could no longer play Fascination with us. So she was spending time working. She didn't have as much time to play as we did, but she wanted to play too. And there was another Fascination on the boardwalk in Seaside at that time. There was one on the next block down a little further on Hamilton Avenue. And it was an older Fascination that had been there from 1952. And Lucky's Fascination was all brand new, shiny, and everything was pristine because they had just opened in 1974, whereas the other Fascination was old style, everything looked run down because it had been there for 15 years plus. And we started playing a little bit over there also. It was a different play. The machines were a little different style. It was a slower game. They had more older ladies playing, like would play bingo, where Lucky's Fascination was a little bit more of a younger crowd, a little faster game. So I didn't like playing at the other Fascination, but that was the only choice my sister had. Excuse me. So we went there once in a while. It was owned by a man named Quinn Davenport. And he was an older man, as he was running his store there for 17 years. Well, we found out it was their last year because their lease had run out and they were not going to be renewed for a new lease. Well, that was kind of sad. You don't like to hear anybody having to go out of business, but I was going over to, play at Lucky's. And oddly enough, because I had gotten into playing Fascination, and mind you, I am 13 years old at this time. I got my first pinball when I was 11. So I've already got a few machines at home. I'm 2 years now into starting collect machines. I got a couple pinballs, a couple gun games. So when I heard they were going to close the Fascination, I got my mom to ask Quinn if they would sell some of the Fascination machines that we could have one at home, because I liked the game. He said they couldn't break up the system. And, you know, he would sell you the whole system. I think at that time he wanted $17,000, which is a lot of money back in 1974. Certainly not something, you know, mom's going to pay for me to have a toy in the basement. So you couldn't buy it. He didn't want to break up the system. There were 52 tables there, and he can't, you know, divide it up. So he said you couldn't buy it. So he couldn't buy it. So I'm over playing at Lucky's, and I used to enjoy playing the game, not only because it was fun playing, but the camaraderie. I was never good at sports in school. I was the last kid picked for, you know, kickball or baseball, you know, because I was the picked on kid. But when you played Fascination, you were playing against other people, just like in any other sports game. And when you win, you're winning the game, not necessarily for the team, but if you're with your parents and you're playing as a family, you're winning for Team Senna. And I started getting better at the game. The more you play, the better you get. Unlike Skillo or Bingo, where you're waiting for them to call the number and you have no control, Fascination, you have control. It's a game of skill. You're rolling the ball. The more you play, the better you get. You get to learn how to roll the ball. And if you have an aptitude for this, which I did, I became very good at it. I had a bonding with the machine because you're playing for hours, you're becoming one with the machine. It's almost like a very supernatural connection that the machine is working with you. You're not playing against the machine, you're playing with the machine. You also get to know the other people who are players, the regulars. They get to know you, become friends. The workers, you get to know the workers. They see you all the time. They get to be friendly. The kids working there, they're a little older than you, but you looked up to him. And the guy running the game, he was like God, sitting up there on the control booth and, you know, announcing that whatever he said is what everybody had to do. He was God running Fascination. And he would be personal. If you spoke to him, he would be nice. Like any other business you go into, people generally trying to be nice. They want your money. Well, all these things combined made us play more and more. Got to the point, I didn't want to play Skillo anymore. I wanted to play Fascination. So when my parents would want to go over to Skillo, I'd say, just give me money, I'm staying here. Now, when you run a game that plays until somebody wins, the game ends for everybody else when somebody wins. It's not just the guy's happy because he won. Everybody else is disappointed because they lost. And there's one winner, there's a lot more losers. So as you have this one kid sitting there and he's winning more than his share, suddenly the other people's become to recognize that this kid is winning a lot. Human nature, they start disliking that kid because he's making them lose. Well, I didn't catch on to that in the beginning. To me, I was just being good at something. You know, people should cheer you on. And there were those who didn't play much who would come in and they'd watch the spectacle of what's going on and see me winning. And sometimes when I was on a real roll and the bell would ring, all the heads would turn. You know, from either side, all the heads would turn to see if I won again. It was thrilling. It was thrilling. I was the superstar. I was the basketball star. I was the football hero. I was the Fascination superstar, winning all the games. And everybody was in awe of my greatness of playing Fascination. Wow. Everybody wanted to know. They would come over, they'd watch, they'd stand around me to see how I roll the ball, but they couldn't do it because I was the pro. I was playing every day. They could have been good too if they practiced and played every day and spent their money, but they didn't. They were there. They wanted to win right away. I was there. Dedication. I played and spent a lot of money. My parents gave me a lot of money in order to play. So I developed a skill at the game. By the end of the first year, I was really, really good. Now, my favorite table was table number 1 because it was the end machine right back by god who was running the game at the Fascination control booth. And I would be enamored by him running the game and inquisitive enough to want to learn what he's doing and how this is working and all this going on. It wasn't just all about winning. I loved every aspect of this thing, and I would speak to him and I'd ask him some questions just in conversation. I just wanted to have conversation with him, personality, and you get to know the people who work in there, and they see you every day, and you get to be friends. And I didn't have a lot of friends at school, so these were my friends. The friends who worked there, the friends who played there, the people who admired me, and the machines who I had that bonding with, that I was doing all the winning. It was like magic. So I realized I had the connection with my machine, and I'd always look to play my machine. And if I couldn't play my machine because somebody had it, I'd wait, so I'd play someplace else and wait till it came. If I'd go over to my machine, I'd give my machine a little kiss hello. I'd give it a little kiss goodbye, a little affectionate pet. My machines began to realize that this kid is special. And we had a bonding. And it became even more magical when the machine became my friend, that it was like I could do no wrong. I would roll the ball, trying to get a light, and it would go right in. It was supernatural, amazingly so. Now, off season, they didn't open both sides because it was manually collected. It was labor intensive. And they would always close the short side. They had 50 machines, and the one side was from 1 to 22. The other side was from 23 to 50. That was a longer side. There were more tables. So when they would only open one side, they would close the side with number 1 to 22, and you had to play on the other side. So I would feel bad I couldn't play my number 1. So I would play a machine near it. On the other side was number 48, became the one that I became very good at, a new bonding. So it was an interesting reason for it, because as I would be playing 48, the back glass is mirrored, and you could see in the mirror, and as I'm playing and I would see in the mirror, I would see number 1 on the other side. So we always still had our connection on it. And 48 and I became very, very close also. So I either played 1 or 48. Either one, those were my tables. They were the magic tables. I was doing my share of winning. Well, one day I walk in. It was the beginning of the second year. This was 1975. And as I walk in, the guy sitting at the control booth says, "Randy," they knew me by name because I was there only, "Randy, come here." So I go over. And, they had a very authoritative way of speaking, like they were going to be in control, keep that thumb down on you. And they said to me, now mind you, I'm a 14-year-old kid. I couldn't even see over the top of the counter, and I was a shy, introverted child. And they says, they've decided that I can no longer play like I'm playing. That I am... I can't win all these games because it's affecting their business and other people, and they're gonna have to limit me, and you have to not play as much. How do you not play as much? I love playing here. So now the heat was on. So as I start playing, now they're gonna start picking on me. They're gonna look for anything they can say as an infraction. Oh, you can't stick your hand in that far. I didn't stick my hand in far. Oh, you can't roll the ball that way, or you can't do this. They were constantly over my neck watching me, and it made me very, very uncomfortable playing there. And that was their goal. They wanted to make it uncomfortable for me to play. So this went on for quite a while, and I had enough. And one day I picked up my coupons and my money, and I walked down to the furthest end of the store on the other side, and I sat down at the last table I could find, furthest away from them at the control, because I just didn't want them over my neck watching everything I did. So I couldn't play my number 1, which I wanted to play, or my 48, because they were right near the control booth. I'm all the way down the other end at number 23. And it didn't take long for 23 to realize what was going on. And I guess instinctively, the machine didn't like it. You know, these machines were all born together. They're one system, and they see what's happening. The kids being shunned, and they knew I was playing like to play. 23 and I got a bond right away. And I started winning on 23 more than I ever won on number 1 and 48. It was unbelievable. Anything I did, perfect scores, gold lines, red lines, it was probably infuriating to the guys running the game. And they couldn't come down all the time and tell me I'm doing this, that, or the other wrong when I wasn't doing anything wrong. And if 23 wasn't available, I played 24 right next to it, so I could be right next to my 23. Sometimes I couldn't get 23 or 24, so I played the end machines on the other side, 21 and 22. All these machines were very good to me, but 23 was the one that I did the most winning on, far more than 1, 48, 21, or 22, or 24. 23 was like unbelievable. Well, fast forward another month or so, and I walk in and I get called over to the control booth again. Randy, we've decided you can no longer play numbers 1, 21, 22, 23, 24, or 48. You can play any other table you want, but you can't play those tables. I'm looking up at God, running the game. What do you mean? They actually wrote a handwritten sign that said Randy cannot play numbers 1, 21, 22, 23, 24, 48, and they had it in their control booth for whoever's running the game to know that Randy cannot play tables 1, 21, 22, 23, 24, or 48. I was devastated, but I'm a kid. And what am I going to do? I sat down and I played the machine next to it, you know, and the machine's open. I couldn't play it, and I'm giving a little affectionate tap with the sad eyes. So I told my mom and dad, and my dad was like, "That's not right. You know, why are they picking on you?" And I says, "I don't know." Well, he didn't want to make a big stink about it. He said, well, can't you play any of the other tables, this and the other? So I did. I had to play the other tables, but I couldn't play my favorite tables, and it broke my heart. And I won, but I didn't win as much because each table is a little different, and those were the magic tables for me, especially 23. Well, by the third year, they decided that they're going to limit how many tickets I can win in a day. They gave you 3 at a time for a regular win. Gold line was 8, red line was 15. That wasn't too common. So if you won 3 tickets at a time and you're going to win 50 tickets, you can't win that many times. So I'm playing, and of course, I would get to 48 pretty quickly. It's divisible by 3. And they would send the floor girl down to say, Randy, you know, you've won 48 tickets. If you win one more, it's going to be 51. You have to leave. You can't play for the rest of the day. So I'd win one more game. I'd be 51. They told me I couldn't play. I had to leave. And I had no choice. It's their store. What am I going to do? I had to leave. But it broke my heart. Because at this time, I was playing Fascination 12 hours a day. Every day. Get up, go over, play, spend a lot of money. Back then, we'd spend $80, $100 easily a day playing every single game of Fascination from opening to closing. Won a slew of tickets. But it wasn't the tickets I was playing for. I was playing because I wanted to play. Okay. So now I can't play more than a few games to win 50 tickets. They made a cardboard sign. And they put it on the wall right by 23 that said, players can only win 50 tickets in a day maximum, so that it's legal. Well, the kids who are working there, they're watching this. And, you know, kids have a sense of justice that's natural It isn't cynically ruined by life by the time they get to be adults and they've seen so much garbage in their life. They're innocent. That's innocent childhood. And they see that I'm a kid and they're making this rule and they're working there and they know that this doesn't apply to anybody else. And they told me so. The kid's working, collecting the money, says, you know, this 50 coupon rule, that doesn't apply to anybody but you. And I said, what do you mean? They said, when you're not here, there's people win way more than 50 tickets. Nobody says anything to them. Now I'm like, really? I was so naive. I was so stupid, didn't even realize that. So I came in one day with a little pad and a pen, and I sat down, and I'm playing down towards the end. And I'm not going to play every game. I'm going to play every few games. So I'm keeping track. I'm writing down table numbers, how much they won. Lo and behold, here's other players winning more than 50 tickets. Nobody said anything. So I called over the floor girl. Her name was Karen at the time, I remember. And I said, Karen, I says, how come that lady over there has won more than 50 tickets and, you know, she's still able to play? Oh, she said, oh, she didn't win 50 tickets. I said, yes, she did. I says, I'm keeping track. And I showed her my pad. And I had all the table numbers written. Not only had that lady won like 70, 80 tickets, there was another guy over there, he had won more than 50, another guy won 50. I said, I'm keeping track. So she stopped off in a huff over to talk to God in the control booth. And then she came back and she said, oh, well, today we decided we're going to go to 70, or today we decided we're going to go to 80. Whatever those other people were going to go to, that's what they were going to decide to go to today. So they made the rules up as they went along. But at least it gave me the ability to play a little bit more. Because if they're going to 80 today, then I don't have to get thrown out when it's 50. We're going to 80. I got to play a little more. So they decided that this situation has got to go, meaning me. So one day I come in to play. The guy at the control booth calls me over. He says, Randy, is your dad going to be around later tonight? Eddie, who was the owner, Eddie, wanted to speak to him. Eddie was very rarely there. He was over at the Skillo. I said, yeah, they usually come after dinner. He says, okay, because Eddie wants to talk to him later when he gets here. Okay. So that day was like the Last Supper. They didn't give me any issues. They let me play. At one point, they had said you can only play an hour a day, from 1 hour to another hour. They didn't enforce any of that. All the little restrictions that they had conjured up to place down on me, to try to squash me, they were all gone. I could play as long as I wanted. I could win as many tickets as I wanted. My father got there about 6 o'clock. You know, he says, you know, how'd you make out? You know, and I showed him all my tickets. I told him, I says, they're not giving me any problems today. I said, but the guy said that, you know, Eddie wants to talk to you later. So my parents hung around for the rest of the night because they were waiting for Eddie. Eddie didn't show up until after 1 o'clock in the morning. He waited till the night was over and there was almost nobody there. Eddie was a big man in stature. And he came in and he walked over to, you know, me sitting down at the end. And he sat down on the table, leaning back with his, you know, butt, being tall, he was able easily to do that. And he kind of looked down at me, you know, in a towering way, and he says, Randy, he says, I heard you were discourteous to one of my girls. I'm looking up and I'm like, what do you mean? Who was I discourteous to? He says, you were yelling and screaming in my store, making a big scene, carrying on. He says, we can't have that here. I says, who was I discourteous to? This had never happened. I was like, what are you talking about? I'm like, what happened? I says, can you tell me who I was discourteous to? So he called over Gloria. Gloria had been working there for a while. She had seniority on the floor. And And he says, was Randy discourteous to you? He was yelling at you, and she had to swear yes to it. Never happened. And he says, for that reason, you're an undesirable, and we're going to bar you and your whole family from the store. You can't come in the store anymore. So we were banished from Fascination for something that didn't happen, never happened. I was humiliated, crushed. I was a very shy kid. If an authority figure came over, said something to me, I'd almost be in tears. And here we were, not only me being accused of something that I didn't do, but being thrown out of the place that I loved to play at and had been at for 3 years, dedicated all these hours and all this skill, my favorite game, the bond that I had with the machines, thrown out like common hooligans. My parents, both my mom, my dad, my sister, were all thrown out, all because what I did or should have done or supposedly did, which never happened. This was my first taste of injustice. I had never really tasted the injustice of the world until this point. Yeah, things happen. Kids unjustly bully kids. But this was, an adult, and he was looked up on, running the game's on the boardwalk, so fair, rules, and I'm being thrown out. The Fascination game is a game of skill. It's licensable by the state of New Jersey because it is a game of skill. Without the skill that the players have involved with playing the game, you cannot get a game license to run a Fascination game or any other game. You have to have the player to have the ability to change the outcome of the game through his skill. So when somebody is good at it because they have developed a skill, you cannot penalize them for an acquired skill. It's not like a casino where they can say, well, you got an unfair advantage because you're counting cards in your head, which I don't think is fair either. But in legalized games on the boardwalk for the boardwalk, prizes and kids, it's very specific. It's game of skill. You're not allowed to penalize somebody for being good. So they couldn't throw me out for being good. They were doing all these illegal things, limiting how much I could play, in tactics to try to get rid of me. But I was affecting their business because I was there all the time and I was winning and everybody knew me. And there were people who didn't want to play because that rotten kid is here playing. We were thrown out in humiliation. There was no place else to play Fascination in Seaside. And it ruined my summer. It was devastating. It ended me. And that's only the foundation for the beginning of this story. And we'll have to continue this on the next section, which will be part 2 of Randy's beginning at Fascination. During the wonderful world of Randy and Main Street Randyland videos telling you about all the stuff. Now, you're going to miss part 2 if you don't push that subscribe button. So do it now so you don't miss any of the stuff. This is great stuff. We'll see you next time, guys. Bye-bye.